Darkness reigned supreme. 6.4 million years ago, in the humid throat of a primeval forest, a scream tore through the dense, oppressive silence. It wasn't the roar of a predator or the lament of prey. It was something new, raw, tinged with terror and despair. A sound that would echo through the ages. The first echo of humanity, born amidst impending extinction. A scream that marked the beginning of a battle for existence we could barely comprehend. Who uttered it? And what or who provoked it? The air was heavy and humid, thick with the acrid scent of wet earth, decay, and a strange sweetness from nocturnal orchids. The primeval forest, a dark green labyrinth, stretched as far as the eye could see, its colossal trees forming an impenetrable canopy that stole the sunlight. Her large, dark eyes scanned the surroundings with primal urgency, every muscle in her body tense, ready to react to the slightest threat. Ara's heart pounded, a frantic drum in her chest. She knew that sound, that movement. It was a giant snake, larger than any she had ever seen, and the metallic smell in the air intensified, the scent of torn flesh and venom. Primal instinct compelled her to act. "Run!" she whispered, her voice choked with panic, pushing Kale behind her, while her fingers already searched for a sharp stone on the damp ground, the only weapon she possessed. The other group members, alerted by the sudden silence and tension in the air, reacted immediately. The elder, Zohar, a male with deep scars on his face that told stories of battles and survival, gripped a thick branch like a club, his keen eyes trying to locate the invisible threat. A distant roar, muffled by the forest's density, made Ara's blood run cold. It wasn't the snake's roar. It was that of a cave lion, a predator that didn't hunt in groups and whose claws and teeth could rip a sahelanthropus apart in seconds, leaving behind only broken bones. They were caught between two terrors, two sides of a primal nightmare. The color of her skin, an earthy tone, blended with the shadows of the trees, an imperfect camouflage, but all they had. Enormous, with scales the color of dead foliage and hypnotic yellow eyes that seemed to penetrate the soul, it emerged from the shadows, its sinuous body coiling in a silent, deadly ballet. Its target was clear: Kale, the youngest and most vulnerable cub, easy prey for its insatiable hunger. Ara screamed, a guttural sound of pure fury and despair, and hurled the stone at the reptile. But the snake was agile, dodging with an almost imperceptible movement, as if the stone were a trivial annoyance. "Kale, run!" Ara pleaded, her voice failing, a desperate plea. But Kale was paralyzed by fear, his wide eyes fixed on the creature, his small body trembling uncontrollably. The snake lunged for the attack, and Ara, without hesitation, threw herself in front of her son, a living shield, a mother willing to give her own life. The impact was brutal, and she felt the constriction of the snake's cold, scaly body tightening around her limbs, cutting off her breath, crushing her. A lament that cut Ara's heart more than the snake itself. The smell of earth, foliage, and animal odors invaded her nostrils, mixing with the intensifying metallic smell, the smell of her own blood. Life seemed to drain from her, but her eyes were still fixed on Kale, who now began to cry, a weak sound of despair. The scream Ara let out was not of physical pain, but of a much deeper pain. The fear of loss, the agony of a mother watching her world crumble, feeling impending extinction in her very bones. Would this be the end? The last lament of a species on the brink? This guttural, wild scream reverberated through the forest, a sound never heard before, a primal lament that defied death itself, a landmark in the silent history of time. What would happen now? Or would that primal scream awaken something more? Something that would change the course of history forever? She carried a rudimentary basket woven from palm fibers on her back, storing fibrous roots and some bruised fruits, the meager sustenance of a difficult day of foraging, every gram of food a bitter victory. Her group, A small family of 12 individuals was constantly on the move, driven by a hunger that seemed never-ending and a persistent fear of larger, more powerful predators. Recently, hunting had drastically decreased, and edible vegetation was scarce, forcing them to venture into increasingly dangerous territories. The savanna stretching beyond the forest was transforming into an arid desert, its once verdant grasses now dry and brittle, and the jungle, once abundant and generous, now hid more dangers than food, its resources dwindling with each season. The ground, a tapestry of twisted roots and thick foliage, crunched underfoot with every step, betraying the presence of any creature. Omnipresent sounds filled the environment, the incessant hum of giant insects, the rustle of leaves stirred by an almost non-existent breeze, and occasionally, the snap of a branch under the weight of some invisible beast. The faint light filtering through the gaps in the treetops created a dance of shadows, transforming every trunk into a menacing figure, every bush into a hiding place for unknown dangers. The suffocating heat clung to the skin, and the almost palpable humidity promised an imminent storm. The fresh metallic smell mingled with the jungle's usual odors, a scent that Era felt deeply in her sensitive nostrils, a premonition of death that had haunted her since dawn, a feeling that intensified with every step. Her small group took deeper into the woods. It was the smell of recently extinguished life, a trail of carnage that wasn't natural, carrying a touch of something profane. Era, a female Sahelanthropus chilensis, the first known bipedal ancestor, clutched her infant Kale to her chest. Suddenly, a hiss cut through the air, chilling and terrifying, and a greenish, scaly blur slid through the bushes, too fast to be fully discerned in the gloom. The snake then revealed itself. Ara's scream, a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of the forest, was a catalyst. The snake, momentarily stunned by the intensity of that unknown and terrifying sound, loosened its grip. The smell of wet earth and the sweetness of nocturnal orchids gave way to a pungent odor of panic and fear, dense and almost palpable. Era, with her shoulder bleeding and throbbing, grabbed Kale by the hand, dragging him with her, her maternal strength overcoming the pain. Ara's heart leaped to her throat, a deafening alarm in her mind. The snake, sensing vulnerability, accelerated its attack, its body lunging forward with terrifying speed, a green arrow in the darkness. Time seemed to slow down, each second an eternity. Era didn't think, she just acted. She pushed Kale to one side with the last remnants of her strength, placing herself once again between her son and imminent death, a sacrifice. But this time, the snake did not hesitate. Its sharp fangs pierced Ara's leg, a searing pain that made her scream again, a sharper, more desperate sound than before, a scream of pure agony. The venom, hot and paralyzing, began to spread rapidly through her bloodstream. The skin around the bite already began to swell and take on a purplish color, pulsating. She felt her muscles seize up, strength draining from her limbs, her body becoming heavy and inert. Darkness began to close in on her peripheral vision, the world spinning and distorting. She collapsed to the ground, her breath ragged and weak, her eyes fixed on the invisible sky through the tree canopy, while the snake prepared to constrict her, to crush her last breaths. The cave lion, now closer, roared again, and the sound seemed to reverberate in her own head, the prelude to an inescapable end. Would this be the end of her journey? The last breath of a life amidst savagery? Or would there be a chance, a miracle amidst the terror that enveloped them? Every step was agony, a stab in her already injured leg. But the image of the snake, its sinuous body, and the ferocity of its yellow eyes was a greater incentive than any physical pain. The smell of blood on her skin, a trail of fear and pain pheromones, attracted even more attention from the snake, which followed them with relentless persistence, its body silently gliding through the thick foliage, almost invisible. Era could feel the heat of the creature's breath on her heels, The sensation of being hunted was overwhelming, paralyzing, a feeling of panic that enveloped her completely. Fear mingled with cold rage, rage at the cruel jungle, rage at the insatiable hunger that led them into these dangers, rage at their own helplessness in a world so hostile. The light, once filtered and dancing, transformed into an oppressive gloom, almost total darkness, making it difficult to see. The hum of insects, once constant, now seemed more like an incessant alarm, a sinister warning. The rustle of leaves and the snap of branches were amplified, each sound a potential harbinger of more danger, a monster lurking in the shadows. The sound of the cave lion, muffled and distant, seemed to draw closer, a sinister drumbeat in the back of Ara's hearing, each roar a beat in her frightened heart. They were surrounded, trapped, and needed to move fast. Run to the rocks, Zohar ordered, his voice hoarse with effort and despair, pointing to a dark, irregular rock formation barely distinguishable in the gloom in the distance. The rocks were a known refuge, offering crevices and elevations where larger predators would have difficulty pursuing them, a last bastion of safety. That lapse was the chance Ara needed. With desperate strength, driven by primal fury, she pushed the snake's heavy, scaly body away from her. Her muscles screamed in protest, every fiber in her body stretched to its limit. And the skin of her arm was marked where the constriction had been strongest, a dark, painful bruise beginning to emerge, a map of her struggle. She rolled to the side, gasping for breath, tasting her own blood in her mouth, the result of a superficial bite the snake had managed to inflict on her shoulder during the attack. The wound burned like fire, a searing pain that spread, but the adrenaline pumping through her veins prevented her from feeling the true extent of the agony. Kale, who had been paralyzed moments before, was pulled away by Zohar, the elder, who with a furious roar attacked the snake with his branch, delivering a powerful blow. The impact hit the creature's head with a dull thud. It hissed in response but did not retreat. Its yellow eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating intelligence, and it prepared for a new attack, faster and more lethal. The forest around them, once just a passive backdrop, now seemed to conspire against them. Every shadow, every sound, a threat. The group began to run, a cluster of slender, terrified bodies, moving with surprising speed through the uneven, treacherous terrain. Suddenly, Kale tripped on a protruding root, falling with a dull thud, a small cry of pain escaping his lips. The smell of cold stone and dampness was strong, mingling with mold and a faint odor of bat guano that hung in the air. The darkness inside the cave was absolute, so dense it seemed to suck out sound and color, creating an oppressive vacuum. Footsteps echoed muffled, each movement a whisper, and with every breath, the Sahelanthropus' ragged panting seemed to fill the space with an almost palpable fear. His rough, calloused hands, which had forged primitive tools and hunted for a lifetime, now proved powerless against the venom consuming Ara's life, an invisible and relentless enemy. He applied a paste of chewed herbs, an ancestral remedy passed down through generations, in a desperate attempt to alleviate the pain and neutralize the venom. Its effectiveness, however, was dubious, a fragile hope against such a devastating force. The snake. It was different, Zohar murmured, his voice a hoarse whisper that echoed strangely in the cave. I'd never seen one so big, so fast, and those eyes, they weren't those of an ordinary beast. There was something more, a cold intelligence, an ancient evil. The temperature was milder than in the suffocating forest, but humidity seeped down the rock walls, creating puddles of icy water on the uneven floor, transforming the cave into a damp, slippery labyrinth. She could feel the venom creeping through her veins, paralyzing her muscles one by one, a sensation of numbness that crept up her body. The fever made her confused, and distorted images of the forest and the snake haunted her mind, vivid nightmares in full consciousness. She saw the creature's hypnotic yellow eyes, and a primal sense of terror invaded her, a malignant presence that seemed to want to consume her soul. It was as if the snake was not merely an animal, but a manifestation of something older and more sinister, something that pre-existed life itself. Kale whimpered again, a lament that cut Ara's heart, and she, despite the excruciating pain, gathered strength to stroke his hair. Don't cry, my little one," she whispered, a voice weak but laden with desperate tenderness, a silent promise of protection. "Mommy ... is here." Small stalactites and stalagmites formed sinister shapes in the flickering light of the makeshift torch Zohar carried, made of dry branches and resinous leaves, releasing a pungent smoke. I saw it," he gasped, his voice trembling, almost a lament. An eye ... yellow ... in the darkness, and a smell ... of death. "It's not just the snake. There's something else out there, bigger, older, something that lurks in the shadows." His words echoed in the cave, adding a new layer of terror to the already suffocating atmosphere, a premonition of doom. The storm outside intensified, the roar of thunder sounding like war drums, a prelude to something terrible. What had Ryan seen? Was it the snake or something even more terrible and unknown? A creature of nightmares? The question hung in the air, suspended, while Ara's life slowly ebbed away, each heartbeat a farewell sigh. The darkness of the cave seemed to close in on them, and hope diminished with each breath, threatening to engulf them completely. What awaited them beyond the fragile safety of the cave? Shadows danced and twisted on the walls, transforming the rock formations into monsters ready to attack, into distorted faces of nightmares. The silence, occasionally broken by dripping water or the rustle of bat wings flying in flocks, was more oppressive than any noise. Outside the cave, the storm had finally broken. The sound of distant thunder and the roar of torrential rain on the forest leaves muffled the sounds of the hunt, creating an impenetrable sound curtain. Ara lay on a bed of dry leaves, her legs swollen and purple, throbbing with a pain that radiated throughout her body, blinding pulses that seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. The snake's venom was spreading, and her body was weak, feverish, and her muscles began to tremble uncontrollably. Her half-closed eyes reflected the anguish consuming her, the internal struggle between life and death. Kale, his eyes red and swollen from crying, was nestled beside her, trembling, his small body pressed against hers, seeking the warmth and security she could barely offer, a small beacon of hope in her darkness. The rest of the group was scattered throughout the cave, some whispering in guttural dialects, their voices low and laden with concern, others watching the entrance with silent vigilance, their faces masks of despair and worry. The shadow of death hung over them, a cold, heavy shroud. Zohar, the elder, knelt beside Ara, examining the wound with a grim and somber expression. Ara tried to respond, but her throat was dry, scratchy, and her voice failed, an inaudible sound. One of the youngest members of the group, a male named Rion, who had moved away slightly to observe outside, came running back, his eyes wide with horror, his breath ragged. The cave scent intensified, becoming an intoxicating mix of wet earth mold and a sweeter, pungent odor of burning herbs that Zohar was using to try and purify the air and ward off evil spirits, or perhaps in a desperate attempt to mask the pervasive smell of sickness and fear, heavy and oppressive. Her fever had escalated to alarming levels, and she was delirious, muttering incomprehensible words about the forest and the snake's yellow eyes, her memories mingling with feverish nightmares. Ara's life was ebbing away with each passing minute, each breath fainter than the last. "We need help," he announced, his voice grave and firm, echoing through the cave and cutting through the tense silence. "You said you saw something. Something that wasn't the snake. Perhaps the Whisperers know what it is. Perhaps they know how to fight it. We need Ara. We need her strength and her maternal instinct. We need Kale. We cannot lose them." The elder knew the journey would be perilous, a dive into the unknown, but the alternative was certain death for Ura and the fragmentation of the group. The Forbidden Forest. There are those there who know how to heal what the forest poisons. They know of the darkness's venom, the Whisperers. The Forbidden Forest was a place of myths and legends, a refuge for those who were different, the Whisperers, beings who, according to ancestral tradition, could communicate with the jungle itself and its spirits, guardians of forgotten secrets. No one in the group had ever ventured so deep into that hostile territory, for the forest was known for its natural traps, treacherous swamps, and the fiercest, unknown predators. But desperation impelled them forward, a last hope. Her skin was cold to the touch, despite the fever consuming her, and her eyelids twitched in spasms. Master Zoha got the Forbidden Forest. They say it holds dark secrets. There are creatures no one knows, and that the Whisperers are just legends to scare away the curious. They would depart at dawn, when the storm subsided and darkness dissipated, in search of the Whisperers. The decision was made, and a heavy silence hung in the cave, broken only by Kel's intermittent cries and Ara's ragged breathing. Hope, fragile as the flickering torch flame in the darkness, ignited in the gloom, a small light amidst desolation. But the Forbidden Forest held secrets older and more terrifying than they imagined, dangers that defied comprehension. Would they be able to find it and return before it was too late? And what or who would they find in the heart of that mysterious place, a place that legend said was the birthplace of all fears? Kale, clinging to her, cried silently, small tears streaming down his cheeks, despair etched onto his small face. The rest of the group was restless, tension palpable in every furtive glance, every restrained movement, each battling their own fear. Hunger and fear were eroding what little hope remained, pushing them to the brink of despair. Zohar, his face etched with worry and exhaustion, continued to apply the herbs to Ara, his eyes fixed on the wound that seemed to pulsate, a raw, living wound. "The venom is strong," he murmured, more to himself than to the others, his voice laden with painful helplessness. "Stronger than any I've seen. It's as if the forest itself is poisoned." The smoke from the herbs danced in thin spirals through the flickering torchlight, creating an ethereal veil that transformed the cave into a somber temple, a place of ancient rituals. The sounds of the storm outside were now a deafening cacophony. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, echoing through the rock crevices. The rain hammered against the rocks with the force of 1,000 drums, and thunder boomed, making the very cave tremble, vibrating in its foundations. Darkness still reigned, but Zohar's torch cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move and whisper on the cave walls, revealing previously hidden crevices and niches, secrets hidden deep within the earth. Humidity endlessly trickled down the walls, and the floor was slippery, with puddles of water reflecting the torchlight like yellowish eyes, watching them. Era was worsening by the minute. As the storm raged outside and darkness enveloped them, Zohar decided they could wait no longer. Ryan, the young man who had seen the yellow eye, hesitated, fear etched onto his face, his eyes wide. "An era is dying," Zohar retorted, his eyes piercing, his determination unyielding. With a nod, Zohar chose the strongest and bravest of the group, Ryan, despite his visible fear, and two agile females experienced in foraging, Lyra and Thara. The scent of the forest grew more intense and complex as they delved deeper into the Forbidden Forest. The humidity was almost suffocating, saturating the air with the smell of decaying moss, strange fungi, and an indescribable fragrance of flowering carnivorous plants, a sweet yet fetid aroma that warned of danger even before they could see it. The metallic scent, the same one Era had smelled in her terrible encounter, was now unmistakable, saturating the environment with the odor of death. A strange song, a melodic whisper that seemed to vibrate in the very air, raising the hairs on their arms and sending chills down their spines. Their skin was a darker, almost black tone, and their hair was long and matted, adorned with feathers and bioluminescent flowers that glowed softly in the gloom. Their eyes, a deep amber hue, shone with an ancient wisdom, a knowledge that seemed as old as the forest itself. They were the Whisperers, guardians of the forbidden forest, legends taking form before their eyes. Their presence was imposing, mysterious, almost ethereal. One of them, an elderly female with a wise and calm demeanor, approached Zohar. Her movements were fluid and graceful, almost as if she were a part of the forest itself, an extension of it. "You have come seeking help," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once, enveloping them. "The venom afflicting your companion is ancient, a sickness from the very heart of the forest, the yellow eye. It has awakened." Zohar and his group exchanged glances, startled by the mention of the yellow eye, the same thing Ryan had seen. What was this creature, and what was its connection to the snake? A thread of hope ignited in Zohar's eyes, a fragile flame, but present. They had found the Whisperers, but Era's cure seemed linked to an even greater mystery, a danger that extended far beyond their comprehension, a threat that transcended simple predestination. What did the Whisperers know? And would they be able to cure Era before it was too late, before time ran out and darkness swallowed them forever? The trees around them seemed to lean in, as if responding to a summons, their leaves rustling with an unnatural cadence, almost like a prayer. Small twinkling lights, like giant fireflies, began to emerge from the forest's depths, forming a protective circle around Ryan, driving the snake away with their pulsating luminosity and ethereal glow. The snake hissed, but recoiled, its eyes revealing a glimpse of fear before it vanished into the shadows, as if it had encountered something more powerful than itself. The snake. It was following them, a persistent shadow, or perhaps it was just patrolling its territory, a hunter in its own home. A scaly blur slid through the thick foliage, its yellow eyes gleaming like embers in the gloom, hypnotic and full of malice. There was no escaping it in the forest's labyrinth. Every path seemed to lead to a dead end. Zohar raised his staff, but knew it was a futile weapon against a creature of that size, an insignificant prick for a giant. "Run, in different directions," he ordered, his voice a desperate growl, knowing that their only chance was to divide the beast's attention. They scattered, trying to confuse the creature, their steps swift and disordered. Rian, the youngest and most inexperienced, tripped on a treacherous root, falling with a dull thud, and the snake lunged at him, its fangs bared, ready for the final strike. The young man screamed in terror, a sharp sound that tore through the forest density. Lyra and Thera hesitated for a moment, torn between helping their companion and following Zohar's order, their survival instinct conflicting with their loyalty. Even now sunlight couldn't penetrate the dense, almost solid canopy of trees, which intertwined like an impenetrable web, creating a constant gloom. An eternal twilight that transformed the environment into a living nightmare where every shadow seemed to hide a threat. The sounds were sharper and more alien. The ghostly hoot of nocturnal birds in broad daylight, the rustle of invisible creatures in the treetops moving silently, the guttural sound of giant frogs that seemed to emanate from the depths of the earth. With every step, the ground became more treacherous, with tangled roots that seemed to grasp at their feet, deep mud that sucked at their boots, and vines that seemed to move on their own, ensnaring them. The forest's colors were darker shades of green, so profound they bordered on black, interspersed with the vibrant, menacing red of toxic flowers and the pale yellow of bioluminescent fungi that sprouted from decaying wood, illuminating isolated spots with a ghostly glow. The air was so dense it was almost possible to taste it, a mixture of earth, life, and death. Zohar led the small search party, Ryan, Lyra, and Thera. Their faces were etched with exhaustion and anxiety. each feeling the weight of responsibility, but their eyes held a grim determination, an inner fire that pushed them forward. They moved cautiously, their senses sharpened for any sign of danger, every muscle tense, ready to react. The beasts of the forbidden forest were legendary, whispered about in hushed tones on cold nights. And the distant roar of a predator made their hearts pound, a drumbeat in their ears. Time was their most unforgiving enemy. With every passing minute, Ara's life ebbed away, hanging by a thread. Suddenly, a hissing sound, louder and closer than before, made them flinch, the air growing icy cold. But before the snake could reach Ryan, a different sound erupted from deep within the forest. Suddenly, figures emerged from the forest. They were unlike them. The air in the cave where the whisperers lived was different. There was no smell of mold or decay, but rather a fresh, earthy aroma of healing herbs. The elderly female, who had introduced herself as Nim, was by her side, her wrinkled hands applying a greenish paste to the bite wound with precise and gentle movements. Era was still weak and feverish, but the pain seemed to have lessened, a sense of relief spreading through her body. It is not a creature, but the corruption of the forest itself, a sickness that manifests through beings like the snake that wounded your companion. It feeds on despair and extinction, growing where nature's balance is broken, where hope wanes. Her words were enigmatic, but the meaning was grim and frightening. The danger threatening them was not merely a predator, but something far deeper and more existential, a disease consuming the very world they lived in. It was the jungle itself that was sick, and they were part of it. Ara's venom is a manifestation of this corruption. We can heal her, yes, but the greater sickness, that must be fought by all of us. It is a struggle that transcends time. Her eyes, once glazed and lifeless, now showed a glimmer of consciousness, a gradual return to life. She opened her eyes, fully conscious, and looked at Kale, a faint smile gracing her lips, the smile of a mother who had returned from the brink of death. Relief flooded the group, a wave of emotion that made them sigh collectively. Era was alive. But the cure was not an end to the threat. Nim handed Zohar a small amulet made of seeds and fibers, emanating a scent of earth and life, a blessing and a warning. Use this. It will not protect you from the corruption, but it will guide you. The yellow eye ... It will return. It always returns when hope weakens, when despair sets in. Kale, who had been carefully removed from her side so the whisperers could work, watched with wide eyes, but without the panic he had shown before. Their gratitude was immense, but apprehension was also palpable. They had found Ara's cure, but the mystery of the yellow eye and the forest's sickness hung over them like a shadow, a premonition of future battles. Ara's first human scream had not been one of ultimate despair, but rather of a desperate struggle for life, a call to existence. Now, with the Whisperer's knowledge, humanity had a chance, a glimpse of hope amidst the darkness that surrounded them. The scream of survival, now stronger, would echo through the ages, a reminder of their resilience. What did the future hold for them, and for human existence itself in such a wild and mysterious world? The battle for existence was just beginning, and the yellow eye, without a doubt, lurked in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike again, to reclaim what it considered its own. He was safe, and the sight of his mother, even if weak, was enough to calm his small heart. And a subtle scent of burnt resin, a fragrance that filled the space with a sense of peace and sacredness. The natural light, coming from a crevice in the cave ceiling, was faint and diffuse, creating an ethereal and reverent, almost mystical atmosphere. Soft sounds of chants and whispers filled the space, interspersed with the rhythmic dripping of water that ran down the damp walls, a sound that seemed to accompany their very heartbeats. The cave walls were adorned with Rupestrean paintings that told stories of immemorial times, of forest creatures and mystical entities, figures that danced in the gloom. Small fires crackled, releasing aromatic smoke that danced in the air, and the gentle warmth contrasted with the icy humidity of the outer forest, a comforting refuge amidst the savagery of the world. The environment was one of healing and mystery, a sanctuary of peace amidst life's turmoil. Era lay on a softer bed of carefully arranged leaves, surrounded by whisperers who moved with silent grace. Zohar and the other group members watched the ritual with admiration and apprehension, hope mixed with the fear of the unknown. Nim and other whisperers chanted in a language they did not understand, but which seemed to vibrate in their bones, a sound that echoed the very pulsation of the forest, an ancestral melody. The light from the fires and the crevice in the ceiling seemed to concentrate on Era, enveloping her in a soft, ethereal glow, as if life itself was being breathed back into her. "The yellow eye is an ancient force," Nim explained to Zohar, her voice calm and clear, but laden with deep wisdom, with millennia of knowledge. Little by little, Ara's fever subsided. The swelling diminished, and the color of her skin began to return to normal, a sign of life returning. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple through the tree canopies, Zohar and his group prepared to leave the Whisperer's Cave.